You know what's underrated? Celebrating yourself. Whether you just signed a new client, launched something bold, or survived a week of back to back Zoom calls, pouring a glass of wine should feel like a moment. And when I want that moment to mean something, I call Patricia Crawford, my go to wine lady. Yes, we're fancy enough to have a wine lady. Here on Coffee Chats Podcast, we like a good cup of coffee, but we love our glass of wine. Patricia is both wine consultant and vibe curator. She helps busy women in business choose wines that feel intentional, celebratory, and easy gifts. Plus, the wine she sources gives back to causes that matter, which means every single pour has a purpose. So whether you're winding down or sending a you crushed it gift, skip the guessing and text Patricia. I'll drop her information in the show notes. Hey, welcome back to Coffee Chats Podcast. I am so dang on excited to introduce y'all to Sheila Hawkins. I told you I bring the podcast information, I bring the marketing to the table, but there's a whole host of information that I don't know about business and what other people are really good at in their own specific zone of genius. And Sheila is our productivity queen. Okay, so I'm going to read you her bio so that you have kind of a basis of who she is. And then we're going to get into who she is, what she's about, and what she's working on in her business. So, Sheila Hawkins teaches women business owners how to find time and freedom using her unique system based on who they are, how they're wired, and how they work to bring about transformation in their business and their lives. She also works with corporate leaders and work teams to enhance efficiency and profitability. Sheila is the author of Wielding Time, Taking Back Your Personal Power to Increase Productivity, the co-author of Who's Going to Stop Us Now, and also one of 30 experts interviewed by Michael Brecht. Hopefully I'm saying his last name right. CEO of Doodle for the Productivity Book. For 14 years, Sheila has shared her expertise with thousands of metropolitan Detroit business owners via her column in the Detroit Smart Pages, a newspaper focused on building business to business and business to community relationships. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the
Of
invitation.
course. So we know a little bit about your background so far. I want to know,
Mhm.
take us back a little bit. How did you get started with productivity?
Mm, wow. This was years ago.
Okay.
I I had just gotten laid off from a job. And at that time the market wasn't really very good. There wasn't really very much promise of a job. And so a friend of mine said to me, "Well, why don't you do what you've always done?" And I thought, huh? I asked her what she was talking about. And she said, for as long as she had known me, I had always organized things and people. And I thought, oh, okay, she was right. And so I started down this path to kind of look at, okay, so what does that look like for me? What does that feel like? What do I want to do? And I started out organizing spaces, workspaces, and some home spaces too. To kind of bring that work and family harmony together for the clients that I had. And I found that during that, productivity was a thing that just came up again and again. And I found that when I took that on, that was it. That was my sweet spot. That was it for me. And so I started doing more of that. And then people just started to introduce me to people who needed that particular type of help, and it just kind of flourished from there. And so that's where I'm sitting in my sweet spot.
What a beautiful friend to notice that aspect of you.
Yeah.
So in tune.
Yeah, I didn't see, sometimes everything's just over here. It's in our periphery. We don't we don't see things about ourselves. We just, we're just living our lives. And that was priceless to me. That observation was really priceless.
Yeah. So you have gone from organizing spaces to helping people
Hmm.
create systems for their life and their business. And I
Yes.
absolutely need other people to hear the story about you and your son because that was so cool. So cool.
Yeah, that and I have to laugh every time I talk about this, or every time, I think about it, because it was just one of those things. It's like, it was something that just was like given to me, right? And so the story goes, my son was then about 5, and he was and still is a very multi-dimensional individual. He would do 3 4 different things at one time, and would drive me nuts because I am exactly the opposite way. And so I he would be doing all these things, and his room would just end up being a mess. And at the end of the week, on Saturday, that one day where I just want to kind of kick back and relax, we would fight. He'd have to, for cleaning his room, because it was just a mess, because everything was everywhere. Although he had a place for everything, everything was not in its place. And I realized that the things that we were using to organize his space, they had words. The labels had words on the bins. And I thought, okay, this is not working. And then I stepped on a die-cast car in my bare feet. And that was one of the most unpleasant experiences that I have ever had in my life, ever. It just, that was, that I walked around with, painfully, with a bruise in the arch of my foot for a couple of weeks at least.
Oh,
And my foot was my instep, not my instep, my arch was purple, about as purple as this
oh
shirt.
wow.
And it just, it gotten to the point where it was like, I have had it up to here. I can't do this. Not in my own house. I can't do this. So what is it going to take for me to, because initially I thought, okay, maybe he's not getting it, but that wasn't the case. He was always smart. He was always, he always had his wits about him. He knew, he understood. But whatever it was, what I had in place just wasn't appealing to him. So I thought, okay, those labels, they've got the words on them and he could read,
Mhm.
but it didn't appeal to him. And that's what I saw. I thought, okay, I've done everything, right? It's organized, it's this way, it's that way, and he's not getting it. And then I thought about him and who he is. And I realized that, okay, he's this creative person, he's this artist, and he's not wired like I am. He's not going to understand things necessarily as I explain them to him or as I set them up for him. And so I decided to leave the words, but to add pictures to the labels. And it worked. It worked. Stepping on a die-cast car brought the solution. But moreover, what it did for me was that I realized that, okay, if that little tweak, that one small thing, changed the behavior of a 5-year-old,
Mhm.
so that I don't have to step on another die-cast car or dinosaur or whatever, a Lego or whatever it is in my bare feet. If that made that shift for him, then wouldn't it make the same shift then for my clients?
Mhm.
And I thought about that for a while, and I thought, I'm gonna test this out. So I had a couple of volunteer guinea pigs, and we just, we went through the motions like I would normally do, but then I added an aspect where I talked to them about who they are. What's working for them, what's not working for them, as far as their experience, like moving through that to-do list. Like what is it inside of that action or those actions that's just not working for you. And that led me down a path to start looking at personality
Mm.
and, getting really a lot deeper into the layers of who we are, because who we are, is multifaceted. And I started looking at all those facets and discovered a way to have people go through a process. And now that process is a quiz, but to go through a process then to discover who they are in their relationship with time. And that gave me the clues that I needed to know what kinds of things were going to work for them and what not to even bother with, because that's not who they are. And it's worked for 25 years.
Wow. So when you're talking about personality, are you speaking like was it MBTI and like Strengths Finders test,
Um,
or is this something that you've
you
created
know,
on your own?
It's something that I've created on my own. I looked at some of those things to kind of get a sense and a feel
Okay.
for what was out there, and how those things, like the methods that they use to delve into people. And I one day I decided, okay, that's everybody else's stuff. I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to, bring that into what I do. So I created my own. And I started with 4 different personas, productivity personas, as I call them. And I built them out based upon what I saw with my clients and based upon what I learned about personalities and whatnot. So I had people who I said, volunteer to go through the motions with me. And it just kind of grew and built from there. And so over the course of time, I've discovered that there are a few more personas. So I've added them to the mix, and I was able to create the quiz. And I haven't yet, not yet, not once, had someone tell me they took this quiz. It's like a 60-second quiz,
Wow.
and not come up with something that, where they say, okay, no, that's not me, or, this doesn't feel right. Not once. And so I was kind of shocked. I'll admit that. I was shocked. But for all this time, I've been using it, and then I started sharing it, maybe I want to say, what was it? Somewhere around 2012, 2014, somewhere in there. And outside of, say, private clients, started sharing it, and put the quiz out there for people to take and to start to discover who they are. And that's like the place that I start with people, because that tells me what I need to know foundationally,
Mhm.
and then we just build on that.
Wow. I'm stuck on the 60 seconds because I'm thinking back to I am a personality test kind of, or at least I used to be a personality test kind of
Mm,
person. Like a
mm-hmm,
MBTI, I knew it. Strengths Finders, all up and down, even down to, so I studied human behavior in school, down to the
okay.
attachment styles. I said, okay,
Mm-hmm,
I know everything about myself. But that took a long time. You had to sit a solid Saturday evening. You had to be willing to sit down and
mm-hmm.
dive into who you truly are.
Right.
But in
Yep.
60 seconds, that's impressive.
Yeah, that's what I had kind of narrowed it down to. And it really, I took kind of like, I want to say, an abstract way about it, because I wanted people to feel comfortable, because I find that when people come to me, a lot of time, there's a lot of frustration, sometimes there's a lot of angst, they're frustrated, they're disappointed, they can't get things done. They've tried all the things and then some, and they still don't have any relief. And so when they come to me, it's like, okay, I'm going to try this. I've tried everything else.
Hmm.
And so I wanted people to feel comfortable. I didn't want to take them through this deep, long process. Now we go deeper, of course, when I work with people. But that's the starting point. So I had the idea of a quiz, and the questions aren't anything like what you would see on, any of those assessments that you mentioned. And I did that on purpose because I wanted people to just to be able to relax and be themselves. And that's what the questions that it poses, it tells me about them and who they are, not necessarily anything, say, too scientific.
Mm-hmm.
But I can take the answers that they give me and I can get to the scientific, I can get to the psychology behind it all. And it works for them because it's fun, it's carefree, it kind of takes a load off. And I think it gives them quick wins in the moment, right? You take this quiz, you find out who you are in your relationship with time, and right then you start to understand, oh, okay, that's why I have this challenge. Or, oh, okay, yeah, I do have those strengths. I am really good at that, because that is a lot. That's what I find that a lot of people miss. We're so focused on what's wrong. That's human nature, right? But we forget who we are. We forget about what we bring to the table. We forget about what we're good at, especially when we're not achieving, when we're not producing, right? And so I just wanted to take that load off. And then, like I said, I can get to the scientific, I can get to the psychological stuff. And, sometimes we get to some emotional stuff too,
Yeah.
because of the things that people hold on to and the things that we carry around that we haven't dealt with. It all shows up.
Mm-hmm.
It all shows up in our days.
Wow. So while you were talking, I was thinking some of the phrasing that you mentioned made me think about how, as of late, there is a whole lot of studies that are coming out about middle aged women, specifically in the United States, that are
Mm.
increasingly being diagnosed with ADHD. And a
Uh,
lot of that sounds very parallel to some of the symptoms that you were
mm.
just talking about. Now, I don't know about you. I'm no doctor. I don't know the medical aspect of it behind it. So I don't want to
Mhm.
tell people that they are or are not. But I'm seeing a
Mhm.
parallel between sometimes you're
Mhm.
simply overwhelmed and you just don't have a system around.
Right.
Or at least that's what it
Yeah.
sounds like. What would you say to that?
It, yeah, I would say so too. And because it's not just that you don't have a system, right? It's that you don't have the right system. You don't have what works for you, right? Our tools, our strategies, our processes, the apps we use, anything that we use to support us, to shore us up, they have to fit us like our favorite pair of shoes. And as women, you and I both know what happens when your shoes don't fit,
Yeah.
right? That's painful. And so I don't think it's just about that. I think too that, how can I say this? We, as women, number one, we've got all the things on our shoulders, right? We wear all the hats. But we live in a society, especially here in the United States, other countries as well, but especially here in the United States, society is really, really focused on producing, really, really focused on work. And, if you're not achieving X amount of whatever by X amount of time, then there's something wrong. And a lot of times it's the overwhelm conversation. It's that you don't have the things in place to help you do what you need to do. But a lot of times it's that you don't have what you need that matches you, that meets you where you are. And I think that is one of the biggest oh wow, I don't even know what to call it. It's not a challenge, but it's one of the biggest things that hold people back, not having what we need at our disposal. So instead, trying to fit ourselves, contort, really, because fit isn't the right word, contort ourselves into this box and into this structure, right? This thing, the construct, if you will, that society presents to us. Like, okay, here's how you work. This is what work looks like. This is what you must do. And that's not at all how we're meant to work. But it's what society dictates, it's what we learn. Not that we're taught, we just kind of learn it through osmosis, right? Through, as we grow up, we start to go to school, we go to college, some of us, and we get into the workforce, we start to see these things and we get into those rhythms, but that rhythm doesn't match how we're wired. And so now I think with these studies, because I have seen the same thing, I think now we're in a place where some of us are starting to see that, okay, maybe there's something, maybe there's something going on, right? Because these round pegs don't fit the square holes. And I think too that sometimes we're quick to label, even, medical professionals are quick to label us. Like my son, when he was young, about that same age, about 5, he could not sit still in school.
Okay.
He could not take in instruction, say here, do this, this, and this. He couldn't take it in. He might remember one of, say, 3 things you said to him. And so administrators automatically, oh, he's ADHD. He's got ADHD. And I had to step in and advocate and put my foot down because you aren't that kind of professional. How dare you? And I'll get the information I need from a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that, took him through the testing with, a really reputable, highly recommended professional. He didn't have ADHD. He had the symptoms thereof.
Okay.
And so for him, that made a big difference. And I think sometimes when you look at these studies, it's not necessarily that, okay, yes, you have it, but that you have symptoms thereof. So the way that you operate looks like that, but that's not necessarily what it is. But we have to put labels on stuff, right? We can't just let things be what they be. We have to put labels on things. And so, the labels get placed, but I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. And I won't doubt that, yes, that some of it is accurate.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say too that, okay, but wait a minute, let's really look at this person. Let's look at the individual. Let's look at different scenarios. Because we all do better and then not so well in certain environments, dealing with certain things. So I think it has to boil down to a really very focused personal look at who you are and your circumstances.
Wow. I'm glad that he was there or you were there for him to advocate.
Yeah, me too, because I saw that happens a lot.
Right.
It happens a lot, too much,
Yeah.
too much.
And I'm sure that for women business owners, we are told that specifically in business, our business should look like something very specific, or our day to day should look like something very specific. Which is
Yes.
kind of like one of the main reasons that I started this business is for me not to have to play by someone else's rules.
Yes, right?
Yeah. So I'm glad that you are really diving into that. So you went from physical to the emotional, psychological versions of
Mhm.
organizing systems for people. What did that
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause it
transition look like? I know you tested a couple of different
mm,
people, but how did that change the
mhm.
work that you were already doing with people?
I think for me, looking at that was a really big discovery for me, wow, okay, I can work with this. That was my reaction to it. And, a little bit of oh, how do I do this? But still, just always going back to that person and placing them front and center. Okay, spotlights on you. This is all about you because that's what productivity is. It's personal.
Mhm.
It's not contorting yourself into this box and using what everybody else uses. It's about really looking at things and people on that really deeper layer or level. And so I started there and then started to build a framework that I started to use. Okay, if you're in the center then here are the things that we need to look at, right? These are the things that you need to support you. And it just kind of came together piece by piece with some trial and error, but it was all good. And so I was able to take all those facets that we are and start to look at, okay, so, what kind of tools work for which productivity persona? And then knowing what those, the common tools are, and then some not so, common off the beaten path tools. And, starting to cultivate a list, so that I could have this database of things readily available. And then it was about looking at habits that people needed to create, and having them create those boundaries, and all these different pieces started to come together and formed the foundation that they needed, but it also formed the framework for me to work from with people. So I ended up with more of a focused, intentional way through that, through the testing and the trial and error that I still use today. I've tweaked it a little bit over the years, but here I am all these years later, and it still works that same way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's always because I'm always working around the person. I'm always putting you at the center and building out what you need. So if you change, if you shift, then okay, we can go back to the drawing board, but we use that same framework. We use that same process. And sometimes you have to start all over from scratch, depending upon what changes.
Mm-hmm.
But other times you can go back so far and then start to pull things together. Like maybe you add a person or a couple of people to your team. So, okay, we can go back to this point here and build out from there what we need based on that framework. And so I think that's why it's always worked, because the framework works and it's built around people. And I think what I do is put people at the center and make people the focus when it comes to productivity versus the producing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big difference when you shift your focus to the people, because the people are what's important, not necessarily the process or the producing. It's the people.
Yes. Good. If I hear KPIs one more time.
Oh gosh, yes.
You said people can change their
Mm.
type, right? So when you said that,
Mm-hmm.
I started thinking about, this is kind of tingling my brain a little bit, this
Ah,
conversation. So it's perfect. So I'm
okay.
thinking about how it's something dramatic has to happen, but someone can go from like an anxious attachment style to a secure attachment style.
Mm-hmm.
Does something dramatic have to happen in some of the archetypes that you have? Like how does someone change in that way? Have you seen that
Mm.
in a
That's a real, oh God. Yeah, I have seen that, and actually I've experienced that.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I've seen it in in, let's say, women who, like, maybe when I create, work with them, create their system, they're single, they've just started their business, or maybe they've been in it, for, 3 to 5 years and whatnot. And maybe when they get to the point of, okay, I can finally add a VA, and I can add a marketing person, right? Or I've outgrown this tool because now I have this use, or I have this need rather, and this tool doesn't provide for me what I need. So those are, like, places that, like, times when you can come back to certain places. You don't have to go all the way back to the drawing board, but you can come back and say, okay, if this tool isn't serving you, what features do you need? And then what's out there that fits you based on tool type and your productivity persona? What fits you? And we start to look at those and do some testing, some trying on of things, and to see what fits. And the same thing comes with expanding your team. Okay, now that you have this team, do you take this tool and expand on it? Like, do you add more features? Like maybe you're using something like Monday and you haven't used the marketing tools or pieces inside of it, but now you can, or you have to, because it's more than just you. So okay, you click on that, you start using that, so to speak. And that, in those ways, I think it becomes really adaptable. Or like, I've had women have children,
Ooh.
and then like, it all just, everything changes then, because you have this little person that you are now responsible for, and you're running your business and you're running your household. So we sometimes have to go back a little bit further, and days have to look different, right? Because there has to be time now for that child. There has to be the time for, as the child grows older, homework and all those fun things. And so I've seen it in those ways. And it all goes back again to the persona. And in some cases, your persona can change. I had actually a friend who we knew who she was persona wise. And then some things shifted in her life, health wise. And when she finally was ready to go back to work, while it was like almost kind of sort of the difference between night and day.
Mm.
But she knew, because she knows me really well. She knows my work. She understands it. So she knew, she's like, hey, I'm slipping. And so, can we talk about this? And we found out that she went from one persona to another. And, with the traits that she has, the strengths and the challenges, she was still able to, we're still able to work something out to where, okay, now, things work for her. So she's getting used to that and building that muscle. And, those are the ways that I've seen it, but I've also experienced it. About, what has it been now? 7 years ago, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a really bad car accident, and I suffered a TBI, a traumatic brain injury.
Mm.
And my executive function just wasn't my executive function anymore. And I actually wondered, okay, am I going to be able to do what I do? Am I even going to be able to do any kind of work, right? At the point that I think I'm ready to go back into this. And so I started, when I wanted to come back to work, I started trying to do things the way that I would normally do them. And it didn't work, because the focus wasn't there. The concentration wasn't there. The mental energy wasn't there. And then I had short-term memory issues too.
Oh.
So nothing was serving me as I was used to it serving me. And working past the anger and all the emotion that came with that, I realized, okay, physician, heal thyself, so to speak. I had to do for myself what I do for my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back to my own drawing board and looked at my productivity persona. And I knew, okay, that is not who I am. I knew exactly which persona I was, but I made myself take the quiz, and that's who I was. And so I had to start finding new ways to do things. That was the workaround for the damage that had been done. Find different ways to do things. So workarounds for those until everything was rebuilt, so to speak. And then I started to shift to using things that works for that different productivity persona.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to find what worked for me and to find my footing again, to be able to, to start working again. Because that was the very first thing that I wanted to do, despite how bad things were for me, because I love what I do and I did not want to give it up. And I found that doing that has helped me. And over the course of maybe the last year and a half or so, I've been able to work. I'm slowly working myself back, and I see the shift from where I went to and working my way back to my original self when it comes to productivity and my original persona. But there's still some tweaking to do. But in doing using what I use for my clients, for myself, that made a big difference for me. It was the difference between not being able to work or being so frustrated I couldn't work
Mhm.
and couldn't get things done, to really saying, okay, forget about it, you know, let's do this. And you know how. And using for myself what I use for my clients.
Wow. What a testament. That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, wow, okay, I think I've really come full circle with this. I've been doing this all this time. And I never really thought about how I do things myself, because it's second nature to me. Like the things that I do,
Mhm.
I can do I can do a lot of things basically in my sleep. I can break down a project scope in no time flat. And things like that come naturally to me.
Yeah.
And so to just kind of be stifled like that, that was concerning. But to know that what I've created for other people worked for me, and it really, made the difference again between me being able to work and not. So that was huge for me.
Which is awesome because I know you are really working towards wanting to go back to work first, but
Mhm.
really it
Mhm.
sounds like this influences somebody's life even outside of work and day to day.
Oh yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we're
I
hopefully
think so.
we're living to, what is the phrase? Not we're working to live rather than living to work. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I think, I see a lot of people talk about lifestyle. But what I also see is that people are people aren't it's like the focus is outside of themselves. And when we bring the focus in here and we focus on us, that makes the difference. And so, but a lot of people are, they're living to work. And that's not how, anyway, in my opinion, that's not how life is meant to be lived. Like, yeah, you got to work. If you're, an everyday, person, so to speak, you have to work to some extent.
Right.
It looks different for different people, but I think there's a lot of that, and that I think comes from the conditioning that we're exposed to from a very early age. It's ingrained in us.
Yeah. So what do you mean by lifestyle? People are looking more so outside of themselves. My assumption, at least, has been when I first made the transition to full time working for myself, it was really hard for me to understand that I'm not just the order taker, if you will. I have to go and kind of facilitate and create the business and create the life around that, which for a considerable amount of time up until recently, to be quite frank, it was me creating my life to fit the business rather than the other way around.
Yeah, and that was what I mean by, the lifestyle, like looking out here, like not necessarily creating from in here, but looking out here and creating from there. And I think a lot of times we have things backwards because of that conditioning. We have things backwards, and we put very little focus on ourselves, right? We're even taught to some extent that thinking about ourselves, making time for ourselves, that those things are selfish,
Mhm.
and they're not. They're not at all selfish, because you can't take care of anything or anybody else until you take care of yourself. But I see that's what people do. We're focused on the business, we're focused on work, and we're making that the center of our attention, when we should be looking at the work and adapting work to the lifestyle that we want to live, or that we do live,
Yeah.
instead of letting work take the lead, so to speak.
Yes. I truly had to lean into I am not a 5 a.m. girly.
Ah,
I
ooh,
am not
yes.
going to do that. No, I could, but I
Yeah,
don't
there's
want
that.
to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think too, you 5 a.m. I think a lot of times there's this assumption that you have to be that 5 a.m. girly if you want to succeed. And that is not the case.
Yeah.
That is, you could really short circuit yourself trying to be a 5 a.m. girly, right?
100%. Been there, done that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we went through your physical, you helping people with systems from the physical aspect. We moved into
Mhm.
their personality, their specific persona. What does your business look like now these days?
Mm. These days, and I had to reinvent that too, because I found that initially when I came right back to work, I didn't have the mental agility to go like a full day. Getting better. So nowadays, it looks more like having different programs available that people that are standalone, so people can can purchase those, get into those, and work at their own pace, and having other things available too, just so people can kind of get an introduction, so to speak, to who I am and what it's like, what my approach to productivity is, having those things available that I don't have to be there
Right.
for. And then maintaining my Facebook group so that I can interact with people there, deliver things there as well. And then placing my focus more so on group work and a higher ticket, like one-on-one, one-on-one work. So we go a bit deeper. The one-on-one is there, and that's for a longer time. And that kind of helped me to, not necessarily slow down, but to shift the rhythm at which I was working, because I really love the energy and the synergy when I work with people, and just when I talk with people. I love that. I just that makes my day every day that I get a chance to interact with people like that. And there's a part of me that really misses having the amount of that I had, but the way that I'm working now works for me, and I'm finding that it works for the clients that I'm taking on currently too. So it worked itself out, so to speak. So instead of the all the live events and the one-on-ones, it's more standalone group work and the more intimate one-on-one work.
I like that. That's good. It seems like it's an easy flow for you,
Mhm.
and it's helpful for the your end user as well, because some people are
I
looking
think so.
for, they want to be able to work one-on-one with people, similar to kind of what a therapist does. People want to be able to kind of
Mm,
create community around the issue that they're
mhm.
looking to solve, with the
Right.
option of, no, I need eye contact only on me for
Hmm.
this moment.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I love that you are working your way against hustle culture, if you will, 'cause that seems to be
Oh,
the thing
that.
right now. I think it's kind of trailing out slightly, just a little bit.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Because that just, there's so many drawbacks
Yeah.
to that. Besides burning yourself out, right? I think that if it is shifting, if it is, if people are getting away from that, I know the people who are in my circles are talking about, no, we don't do that
Yeah.
here. But if we all as a whole are starting to do that, I think that's awesome, because we tend to focus on work, 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 not on the self,
Mhm.
right? And we tend to focus on the doing of things, and what there is to do, and our to-do list. And it's like, okay, but wait a minute. I've always told my clients, like, your to-do list is great, we can work with that, but you have to think about your to-be list. Is it that you need to be
Mhm.
to do those things? And furthermore, who is it that you need to be to get where you want to get? Like, what's your ultimate goal? It's not that to-do list. Like, yeah, knocking it out takes you forward, but what's the ultimate goal? What are you really working toward? And I think that hustle culture is something that just kind of keeps you going and going and going, and you lose track of what that ultimate goal is, right? You lose track of the big picture. You can't even see the big picture anymore because you're so focused on, okay, what do I need to do next?
Mhm.
We lose sight of where we're going.
Yeah. I remember, I think I said this in a different episode. I went to the doctor's office one time and they did their random, the general questions that they always ask. Oh, the
Mhm.
weight check-in, the height, all the things. And then the lady sat down and she said, "Okay, so are you still drinking 5 cups of coffee a day?" I said, "Five?
Oh, wow.
Excuse me. That's crazy." And it was all steeped in
Yeah.
me. And at that time, I was drinking. I was probably, not probably, I definitely, my day existed on, I got a cup of coffee, and the coffees were my breaks throughout the day. And then I would eat an actual
Um,
meal if it was like a lunch, or an eating
mm,
meal, a working lunch or
mhm.
something like that at work.
Right.
Or if not that, then I'm eating at home once the day is
Mhm.
over. So that was fueling everything that I was doing, and so
Wow.
much of the opposite of the kind of people that I was looking to serve and am currently
Mhm.
looking to serve now. Because again, we're looking to impact people in their lives. So we need to be able to do that for
Mhm.
ourselves first and be the example.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, it's got to start with us.
Yes. What a crazy time. We've moved on from that.
Oh, yes.
So I like the idea of being. What are you doing? Is there something that you're doing or like a practice that you have from day to day that really sets you into that reminder to truly just be?
You know, I have found here lately that I need more than one, say, check-in with myself
Okay.
during the course of the day. So I start my day with a meditation, and that kind of, I become aware of not just what's going on with my body, because that's still important right now with the injuries and whatnot, but it it kind of it helps me to gauge what's really going on with me inside. And at that point, I might decide, okay, I'm not going to do the things that I, said I was going to do today. Those things are going to get moved because I'm not I'm not in the space within myself to be able to do that. And so there are some days where I just choose to just be. I don't do anything. And then there are days where there's something to do and I don't necessarily have what I need to do it. So I kind of gauge that. And then I have to ask myself sometimes, okay, so what's it going to take? Who do I have to be? What shoes do I have to step into? What hat do I have to put on? What attitude, what perspective or mindset do I have to get that done instead of moving it? Because sometimes it just doesn't make sense. Sometimes it doesn't help to move things forward. And so that, in the morning, that's what happens for me. And then I try to do an afternoon check in and then an evening check in to just kind of see, like, okay, where am I at? How am I feeling? How did my day go? That kind of thing. And just kind of, especially when I start to feel hmm, angst
Mm-hmm.
or, anxious about something, or, maybe because something, in my personal life has happened or something, in the world has happened, I have to kind of, come back in here and just, kind of gauge where I am and realize that, okay, why are you feeling what you're feeling? Or, why is this stopping you? And just kind of, that self
Yeah.
check-in. And just to use meditation and, different techniques that I've learned over the years, just to kind of bring myself back on square so that I can function, you know?
Yes.
And I think that's what we don't necessarily do enough of because we aren't taught to. We don't learn to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not taught that. But I find that it works wonders for me so that my days are more they flow better. There's more flow in them and I get more done that way.
Yeah. That's good. Almost like
Mhm.
I've had to. mimic a version of what you just described. However, I have to
Mm,
force myself to stop because something that I have
mm, mhm.
on my end is I think, "Oh, I can do all the things. I'm gonna keep doing all the things. I have the energy right now.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
good."
Mhm.
But sometimes just because you have the energy doesn't mean that that's something you should be doing.
Right.
So,
That's a very, very good
yeah.
point. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
The people who listen to this podcast are typically women business owners. What's something that you want them to walk away from this episode, from what you
Mm,
do, all of your expertise that you dropped for us today before we get into our
mhm.
faith note?
I think, hmm, the one thing that I would say is that I would say place your focus on yourself and not necessarily on what there is to do, because there's always going to be something to do. Place your focus on yourself and take care of yourself. And so that you're not pouring or trying to pour from an empty cup, and start to shift how you see things and put yourself first and put yourself at the center. If you are struggling to get things done, start to put yourself at the center and let everything else form around you,
Mhm.
so that you are the priority, and put the focus on you versus on the producing.
Very good.
I think that makes a big, big difference. And it's a great place to start.
Yes. That makes me think of how everyone's talking about boundaries and creating
Mm,
space for yourself, like you mentioned. And really,
yes.
boundaries are really for yourself so that you know when to lean in and when to
Yes.
lean out.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I love that. That's so good. And I know somebody just heard you say that and they're kind of like, "Mm, focus on myself. I don't know how to do that. I keep
Right.
hearing that. That doesn't make any sense."
Yeah.
And as a
Mm-hmm.
person who has said that, and as a person who has days where I don't understand how to make that happen,
Mm-hmm.
I get it. It happens when you truly put yourself in the position to listen to the wisdom that other people are giving you, like Sheila Hawkins, one, but then two, you truly just sit down and listen to your own in your
Mm-hmm.
silence. One of the things that my mom often tells me is just wake up and don't say anything. Even if you have to cough, just
Mm-hmm.
try to cough quietly so that you can hear what's going
Mm-hmm.
on
Right.
inside of
Yeah.
you.
Just
Yeah.
listen. Just listen. Yeah.
That might have been your
Yeah.
faith note. What's your What's your faith note for our listeners?
Other than that, I would say that we create our own realities, and I think since that's true, we have to believe in ourselves,
Mhm.
and we have to believe that we're capable, and we really are. I think for me, I think anything is possible. So I guess that's my faith note. Anything is possible, because when you have that possibility, you create that possibility, you are given the wherewithal. You have everything that you need at your disposal. You might have to dig deep to find it and to bring it out and to use it, but we have to believe that we have that, and we have to trust that we have that ability within ourselves. And we have to remember too that no matter how you see God, there is still something that is greater than ourselves, right? There is a higher power, and we have the capacity to grow and to create and to change even when things seem to be stacked against us.
Yeah.
We have that power, so we have to believe in ourselves that, okay, that power's there, and to look to find it, to use it.
You've been listening to Coffee Chats podcast from iMoves Management, a marketing agency serving small business owners. This episode was written, hosted, produced, and edited by me, Tahjma VanBuren. If you want to learn more about anything you heard on the show, schedule your coffee chat using the link in the description. We'll talk all things podcasting and how to use it as a true marketing strategy for you and your small business. Go to imovesmanagement.com for further information. Thank you to our listeners for supporting the show. Bye.